Hello everyone and welcome aboard once more for a sunset safari here, coming to you live from Kenya. We're in the Masai Mara and in the Mara Triangle to be exact, looking out over a very beautiful bull elephant grazing happily. My name is Ralph Kirsten and on the camera we've got Craig. How's it, Craig? Please, everybody, don't forget to join us on the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter and on the YouTube live chat. Send us your questions and your comments, and please get involved in the largest game drive in the world. Now, we've started out this afternoon coming down the Olololo escarpment, and who is our usual suspect? But it seems another beautiful elephant. And so we thought it would be rude not to stop and spend a little bit of time with him. It's nice and hot at the moment. There's not much wind, but we're probably talking in the lower 30 degrees centigrade, probably mid 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's very calm and warm at the moment. And you'll see that from the flapping of the ears of the radiator of the elephant, keeping himself cool in this nice early afternoon heat. And we have been having a look around already to see if we can find the Angama Olololo lion pride, but for now they're evading us. However, we have just started the sunset safari, so I'm sure there's still very good opportunity for us to find them. And we know how predators are when it gets a little bit hot. They can be a little bit lazy, so it's not such a bad thing we don't find them just yet, because I'm sure they're lying up in the shade. And so while we decide what we're going to do for our plan and moving along from here, let's head you on over to Jamie, who has got one of our feathered friends.
I have a lovely bird to start off our afternoon in the form of a woolly-necked stork. So named because, you guessed it, its neck looks quite woolly. It's not in fact wool, it is made of feathers, but nevertheless a bird that I don't think we spend nearly enough time with, and a bird that currently is fishing about in the mud puddles on the road. Rolf is absolutely right, it is a very hot afternoon this afternoon, which means that very soon, if it doesn't rain tonight, those puddles will all be dried up, and the stork will have to move to more conventional spots to do its stabbing. Probably after small water insects, possibly frogs, possibly tadpoles as well. We know that frogs are very capable of utilizing these puddles as quickly as they form. And we'll go and have a look and see, once we move forward a little bit, what the stork is actually after. But we'll watch him for a little bit longer. First, though, I had best introduce myself, since the stork is being very obliging and actually coming towards us. How wonderful is that? My name is Jamie, and this afternoon Adrian is on camera with me. And welcome to Jamie's Slow Safaris. Why slow safaris, you may ask? Because I'm stuck in low range. And because we can't over-pressurize the low-range gear. Long story short, long story, these cars are made up of a couple of different parts. We're going to be traveling very, very slowly, which means I've got a better chance of finding the Olololo pride because I can't actually move all that far. I definitely can't cover distance, but it's good. It's going to be a challenge for me to see how much of a safari I can get out of a very small distance out here. Fortunately, in the Masai Mara and in the northern part of the triangle, there's no shortage of interesting things to show you. I love stork's toes. They're just so peculiar looking as they walk along, and the stork is coming right up to us. It's amazing. I'm not entirely sure I've ever had one come this close to us before. Lovely to hear from Wendy this afternoon, or this morning, depending upon where Wendy is, or possibly quite late at night, depending upon where Wendy is. Now, Wendy says it is number 45. Did I hear that right, Megs? Number 45 on Wendy's bird list. 49? Oh, I'm so sorry, Wendy. I've put you down by 4 birds. Number 49 on Wendy's bird list. For our new viewers who perhaps have just discovered this live stream, we always encourage our viewers to keep a bird list And we share a sort of running total as we go along, and you can do that on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. That's how you can get hold of us. Our keen birders out here, I'm pretty sure, will have woolly-necked storks on their list. Oh, he's turned away from us. Dale, yes, we do regularly. Now, Dale wants to know if we ever collect birds' feathers out here. We do regularly. Unfortunately for us, most of the time, by the time we in the Mara find a bird's feather, it's usually looking a little bit of the worse for the wear. I picked up one belonging to a scarlet ibis not too long ago. I don't actually know where it went in the end. That's quite sad. And I gave one to James that was from a crowned crane. But most of the time it rains overnight, so by the time we find them, they're all sort of muddied and in less than peak condition. But we do, absolutely. We do collect birds' feathers. There was, when I first started many months ago, years ago now, James and I had a minor battle over the lilac-breasted roller feathers in my hat, because he completely erroneously told everyone that I stole them from him, which of course was not the case. They belonged to a friend of mine. But yes, any of those sorts of birds with the iridescence on their feathers. Jamie, one of our viewers, not me, this didn't come from me, just to clarify, because it's the kind of thing that'll start rumours. Jamie says, watch out, storks bring babies. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. One of our viewers, oh goodness, I had a sudden fear I wasn't going to be able to change my other gear stick, but it's okay, it's working. We had a question a while back about where the story comes from about storks bringing babies. Of course, largely to do with the fact that it's, parents attempting to avoid the conversation as to where exactly the babies come from, and the poor storks get blamed for people's interesting behavior. And we talked about where the story comes about storks bringing babies. And the answer has to do with all kinds of interesting things, including festivals that were associated. So essentially, 9 months prior to the return of a fair number of migrating storks, such as the white storks, 9 months before that, if I remember correctly, there was some sort of festival that essentially fell, well, as you can guess, right before, 9 months before the return of the storks. So all of a sudden there'd be a number of babies coming out of the, let's say, woodwork. And as a result, one of the reasons behind that story was that the stork got the blame. Somebody also mentioned pelicans as being associated with bringing babies, but it is a very, very old legend, and it stretches back way beyond when Hans Christian Andersen actually wrote about storks carrying babies. And I think Germans also, storks finding babies and bringing them to households. Can you imagine? Now, there's a fair amount of background to the myth and legend that storks bring babies. But yes, thank you for the warning, Jamie. Much appreciated. Fortunately, I don't think the stork looks quite up to carrying any babies around. Gaming? No. No, I don't think that that birds are more intelligent than other animals. And the reason that I think that is because they have, as a general rule, relatively small brains. There are certain birds that are very intelligent for birds. Something like, for example, the problem-solving minor birds. Crows and ravens are also thought to be quite intelligent, as well as parrots, which have, I'm not sure what the record is for the most number of words learnt by a parrot, but I'm sure it's pretty high. And they, of course, live for quite a while as well. But there's different ways of measuring intelligence, and in terms of really trying to compete on I hate using the word intelligence, but I don't know what other word to use. So I guess in terms of competing on the intelligence scale, they're pretty outcompeted by things like hyenas or elephants, or everything's designed differently out here. And it's difficult to compare the intelligence of one animal over another. But no, I wouldn't say that they're more intelligent than other animals. In fact, I would say they're probably on average less intelligent than most mammals. Very instinctive. They do, however, one thing we can say, have fantastic eyesight. And of course, each animal is designed for a specific purpose in a specific way, and parts of their brain will be taken up with those nerve pathways necessary for that. But birds have exceptional eyesight. They're capable of picking up on all kinds of movement. As you know, vultures can spot kills from the air when they are exceptionally high up. The stork is not very good at this whole hunting thing. Try and get the insects, but really, all it's done so far that I can see is scare them away and then snap at them as they fly past. Oh, here comes the next puddle. What have we got here? Definitely some waterborne insects, I imagine. Okay, well, we're going to leave our woolly-necked stork and continue on our slow safari. Fortunately, Ralph is not held back by any such restrictions, and I'm sure is flying along at, well, average speed.
Thanks, Jamie, and yeah, we are able to move along quite nicely. So what I thought we'd try and do is get a little bit of ground and head out towards the crossings on the river, and we'll see if there's any animals around there. I'm sure we'll see some hippos and crocodile, but nice conversation that was going on there about birds and their intelligence. I'm not sure if Jamie mentioned that for me, I've done a little bit of research on it, and we were chatting about it the other day when we watched those palm nut vultures, well, the palm nut vulture having a little bit of a tiff with the ground hornbills over the food source being that of a dead terrapin. And then there was a little bit of a discussion after that about birds and their intelligence. And the research that I've done shows that birds like crows and seagulls are quite intelligent birds, and it shows with them using tools or taking their food source up to a different height. And so the crows and the seagulls have often been noted taking, for instance, mussels or bones up to a height, dropping it down onto rocks. So that is very interesting, and I hear that while we're talking about birds, let's just stop here, and sorry for the little bit of an angle there, Craig, with these crowned cranes, but and I hear that Jamie was talking about the talking capabilities of parrots. So they're learning to be able to repeat or mimic. And we do have quite a lot of birds that can do that, like the fork-tailed drongo, the chorister robin chat, and a number of others. But that's mimicking, and with the fork-tailed drongo, I do believe that it is mimicking in those situations, enabling it to be able to scare birds away from a food source potentially, and a number of different reasons. But whether that equates to intelligence, I'm not so sure. Like the bearded vulture, which can take bones up to extreme heights and drop it on the rocks in an attempt to get to the marrow on the inside, is it intelligence, or is it instinctive, or is it just learnt from the adults, passed on through generations? That's a difficult question to answer, but it definitely seems that some birds are more intelligent than others. And I often think of an ostrich, which is for me, not a very clever bird at all. And if you compare an ostrich to a chicken, for instance, I think the chicken is far superior in its intelligence than an ostrich. But that is also debatable, I suppose, where we talk about instinct versus learned behavior and intelligence thereof. So quite difficult to actually work out. But I still think that the ultimate in working out intelligence is how much the brain is able to grow from birth to adult. So from infant to adult, how much that growth is there. That also equates to how much learned behavior there is available. That for me makes sense. But overall, I think birds are pretty clever in terms of their instinct and the way that they have been able to survive through the eons. But that was a nice little stop with these crowned cranes. I think there's a nest here that the other guides have been stopping at. I haven't quite seen the nest myself, but I'm still making my way down towards the river crossings, so I thought we'd just stop there quickly and just carry on with that conversation. The other thing is, I heard that you were talking about birds or feathers being picked up by guides. I must admit I'm a little bit naughty with that, because I do like to pick up birds' feathers, especially nice colourful ones, because I tie my own flies. I'm a fly fisherman, so you can get a lot of artificial material to tie these flies and different streamers and for different kinds of fish, and so I prefer the natural stuff. And so whenever I see a little carcass or something like that, I often just pick out the little feathers that would make for very good flies. But whether I'm being naughty or not, I don't know. You know, we don't generally take natural products out of any of the national parks, but I think we'll be excused for the odd feather. Let's just, while we're going down this road, let's also have a little stop in here with some other usual suspects. Once again, a lovely hot day, so I'm sure these buffalo are just enjoying walking through a nice sloshy area. It's a little bit swampy, marshy here, and it's probably two bulls that are out here on their own, and they're just happily grazing through. See that lovely big thick boss? That is very evident on the bulls, and very easy to make your decision on what kind of sex you are looking at. And you see that ever-present oxpecker. There looks like lots of them that are just flitting around in the grass next to them. And we were having a conversation just before we came out on drive with Jamie. There has been quite a lot of studies going on with oxpeckers and whether or not they actually assist in limiting the number of parasites on the animals that they feed off of. And it seems that they don't potentially decrease the numbers much at all. So there is conflicting ideas whether oxpeckers actually assist in keeping those numbers down. Now, obviously, they are picking off quite a lot of them, so there must be a little bit of an influence. But after having read some of the research and some of the very intelligent and clever people that worked on them, saying that there's not too much that is done in the way of limiting the tick numbers, but on the converse, or the other side of the coin, in areas such as the Eastern Cape, which is a very farmed area, there has been a lot of poisoning of predators and as a result also influencing a lot of the other wildlife, as well as a lot of dipping of the cattle and the livestock to limit the parasites or get rid of them completely. And so this does result in the oxpeckers suffering because they get poisoned as well if they had to eat some of these parasites, which are poisoned by the farmers, then they too would die. So in the Eastern Cape, they've pretty much wiped them out completely. And they have found there that they have had a much bigger increase in transferable diseases from ticks in the Eastern Cape. And they think that this is as a direct result of there not being any oxpeckers in the area. So there's been a lot of research done, and now they've reintroduced oxpeckers with the help of the farmers and them giving the assurance that they're not going to be dipping their cattle and their livestock, and trying to get these oxpeckers to establish themselves once again in the natural area that they once were, and in an attempt to try and limit the amount of transferred diseases from ticks, because they have noticed an increase since the absence of the oxpeckers. So I think that the results of that study will really show if there is indeed a real effect that the oxpeckers play, because if they find that the diseases then reduce after this, then we would have conclusive evidence. But for now, it's not conclusive, and so they need to continue with the research. But I'm going to head on down towards the river. Let's head you on over to Jamie and see what she thinks about the matter.
I couldn't agree more than with what Ralph has said already on the matter of the oxpeckers. Nothing's conclusive. A lot of the research is basically saying that the oxpeckers are not necessarily not beneficial to nature. They're not necessarily as beneficial to the host as we once thought. And that's because the parasites, the ticks that they're pulling off, have already fed on, they've already bitten and attached themselves to that animal. And a lot of the time, the oxpeckers can pull them off, leaving the tick's head behind, just as you are not meant to do when you pull ticks off yourself or off your pets. So the point is more, I think, that they're not as beneficial to the hosts as they might otherwise have thought to have been, but they're still hugely beneficial in terms of keeping the tick numbers under control. There's some animals up ahead. This is by top speed, by the way. If I were in a race with James Hendry right now, I'd lose. Now, Umkar, you want to know what kind of a disease the ticks can transfer or move between animals. There's a couple of different ones. The main one is the rickettsia, so tick bite fever. Rickettsia, for the most part, most animals have a large level of resistance to that particular disease. So human beings, you'll find, will get tick bite fever regularly if they're in an area with lots of ticks, or in theory they do. I think I've had it once and never again. Brent's had it about 5 million times. Every time he walks past a blade of grass, he gets tick bite fever. But in theory, pretty much everyone who is exposed to those ticks at some point, I think it's 1 in every 1,000 bites, will get the rickettsia infection. But animals, why are you so far away? That's not what I was going to say. Animals like these impala, let's see if they've got any oxpeckers on. Continue with on a theme of our flighted animals. Animals tend to have a pretty solid resistance. Now, one thing we don't get here is Lyme disease. So the ticks here do not spread Lyme disease. It does not occur here. So that's something that we don't have to worry about, which is why a lot of people get very distressed in these areas when they come as a tourist, and then they hear about tick bite fever, and then they immediately think of something like Lyme disease. What are we all looking at? Distraction. What's there, guys? What did you see? Nothing. Nothing. It's called impala paranoia, I think. I don't think I can see anything around there. There's a number of other diseases that are transmitted by ticks, and I don't remember off the top of my head all of the different names for them. I think a lot of them affect cattle, causing high fevers, but essentially one form or another of a different type of bacteria. But there are quite a few diseases, and generally the animals that occur here wildly and naturally tend to be resistant to them, and the cattle, for example, are not. Hence the idea of dipping them. It just makes them, most of the time it's not fatal, it just makes them incredibly uncomfortable and very thin and very unwell. impala are basically hidden behind this grass. I had a thought. I think I'm going to try and go further up the escarpment and search for the baboons. Now, Bunny, you say so you get tick bite fever all over Africa. I couldn't say all over Africa. Africa's a big place. There might well be places where it doesn't occur. But I suspect that in most parts, yes, you can get tick bite fever. It's something that's very common in southern Africa. It happens regularly. And most guides will find that they get it on a pretty regular basis. But once you've had it, if you can, I'm not saying that you should, but most guides will try and avoid treatment unless they're very unwell, because then at least you've got a degree of resistance to the whole process. I'm pretty sure it's most of Africa. I'm not sure about if you get to sort of the Sahara North. I'm not sure. Perhaps Rolf has some more depth of answer available for you in terms of the distribution of different types of tick bite fever. But since I haven't got anything and Rolf has found you a very large bird, let's head across to him.
Thanks, Jamie. And yes, well, we've found one of our Jurassic chickens, and look at the drumstick on that. No, I'm just kidding, everybody. But lovely to see a wonderful female ostrich as she goes about her daily business, just foraging, eating whatever is in front of her. Now, as far as I know, Lyme's disease or tick bite fever limited mostly to sort of the warmer parts of the world, so it doesn't extend into colder regions. So I think everything in sub-Saharan Africa, but I'm not sure. I don't think in the very dry regions like Australia and those desert areas. So I think they're a little bit too dry. It's quite similar in Namibia. You actually don't get a lot of those diseases and so on because it's too dry for a lot of the smaller invertebrates and little microorganisms, bacteria, etc., to be able to flourish. So both cold and too dry can really limit those kind of diseases. But let's get back to our bird. And for those of you that don't know, ostrich being the largest bird in the world, it has lost its ability to fly, and so those wings and the feathers used mainly for covering those very exposed legs, both from the sun and also can help to keep those very exposed legs warm when it's very cold, because the ostrich is actually very well adapted to desert conditions, and so can actually go its entire life with never having drunk a sip of water. It can get all its needs in moisture sense from what it feeds on, and so it is actually one of the true desert animals, coupled with the springbok and the ground squirrels and the oryx doing very well in dry conditions, and so much so that when it is too wet they don't do very well at all. And it goes to show with the ostrich farmers, they find it very difficult to breed when they're in a high rainfall area. Now, Dale, you want to know if ostrich feathers are soft and sloppy or softy because they look so? Yes, in fact they are, Dale. They're very sought after for all sorts of garments, and the farmers of ostrich they're in a very good business because every single piece of an ostrich can be used. The leather of ostriches is very well sought after as some of the best leather or natural leather out there. So they can use the feathers for all sorts of garments. They also make feather dusters out of them, very good ones at that. And also the leather being used in some of the most famous fashion accessories. It's very soft leather. Look at that. She's got a rock that she swallowed in the neck. It's still busy going down. Look at that. It's still going down, down, down. And what they do is they swallow rocks because it helps them grind their food up in their stomach. So they don't have a very good system naturally inside their stomachs. So they swallow rocks in a real mechanical grind-up mechanism. And they will excrete that at some stage. So they do very often swallow rocks. And when we were children, we had some friends that had their own ostriches. That's the beauty of growing up in South Africa. Sometimes you have friends with weird and wonderful animals like that. And we used to feed the ostriches rocks, and then as children do, we used to have fun holding the rock and stopping it from going down, and then letting it go, catching it again and letting it go. It was a really fun activity for us. And well, the ostriches didn't seem too perturbed, because they would continue trying to grab our sandwiches out of our hands, and they have quite a peck on them. Luckily, it's quite a blunt beak, but it can knock you almost like a punch. And yes, if you're holding your sandwich out, it's very often knocked out of your hands onto the floor, into the sand, and then the ostrich then gets his meal, because we didn't want to eat our tomato sandwich out of the sand. But you see how they will grab things and throw it into the back of their throat. Now, Hannah, you want to know if the ostrich is related to the Australian emu. Hannah, I believe so. I might be mistaken there, but as far as I know, they are of the same lineage. But they are so interesting, because you see their eggs are very big, and they're probably around 22 chicken eggs in size, and they make for a very good omelette, but it's a very rich omelette. So you do need to it's almost like if you're eating a very big cake with a lot of icing on it. You almost like to have little small portions, but very tasty. And what the Bushmen or the Khoisan people of old used to do was they used to take these eggs, very difficult to get away from the male and female protecting the nest, but if they were able to get to them or distract them, and one of them went in and stole some of the eggs, they would eat the contents of the egg, making a small hole in it and emptying it out, and then they would use those ostrich eggs shells as storage containers for water, and they would put a little plug in it, a wooden plug at the top in the hole, and then they would bury that in locations all around where they used to move going on hunting expeditions. And so they would remember where they had stashed these water stockpiles in their ostrich eggs, and then they would go back to those zones and access the water. So very clever of them indeed, but very thick egg that they have, and they also make for very good tourist or anybody for that fact. I've got one, souvenirs. But the souvenir that I have was one that I picked up myself. You can polish them to a very nice shine. Jimmy, you want to know if it's true if more ostriches live on farms than in the wild. I haven't even looked at that kind of ratio, Jimmy, but it's quite possible, because in the Kruger or the western parts of South Africa down towards Cape Town, there's a lot of farms. And like times of old with the springbok as well, they have been hunted almost to extinction in the area, because there used to be millions of them. So I think with the ostriches probably being utilized like that as well, and with the degradation of their habitat, it's quite possible that now there's more ostriches on farms than there are in natural areas. But like I said earlier, the real true natural areas for ostrich being very dry parts of Africa, so extending up from Cape Town along the west coast up into Namibia, into the Kalahari. That's mostly their perfect kind of habitat. All right, so I think we've had lovely bird discussions to start the Sunset Safari, but let's head you on over to Jamie for a different kind of animal.
a different kind of animal, or at least an animal without feathers, but not the animal that I thought I was coming to find up here on the top of the escarpment. A group of topies. Unfortunately, the baboons have moved further into the valley beyond where we can reach them with signal. Just look how absolutely glossy the coats of these antelope are. I don't think we ever really appreciate I don't know if I would call it beauty of the topi, but perhaps the design of the topi might be a better way of describing it. I mean, that looks like copper. That looks like polished copper, the way that its fur is laid out. And then obviously there's a place where it's been scratching on its back, so it's fluffed up the fur, and it's created almost like if you run your hands along velvet, and you can sort of go in one direction and then the other direction, and you get two different colors. It's like that. Now, he or she, I think she, has obviously been scratching that part of her, so it was all fluffed up. But she's just so smooth and glossy. She really does look as though someone's taken a polishing cloth to her and given her a jolly good rub down. And to think, we've been talking about ticks and parasites, and she's probably has a fair few of them. She probably also has a number of different types of fly larvae, particularly around her nostrils or possibly around her eyes or in her ears. But she doesn't look it. She just looks in peak condition. Muscles rippling underneath that skin. And you want to sort of run your hand along that coat, and you can just imagine what it feels like. It must feel so silky. Not, of course, that we encourage petting wild animals. I'm just saying, if one could, I bet it would be unbelievably smooth. Or possibly, actually, not as smooth as one might think. It looks very smooth. But the times that I've touched impala pelts and, felt the skin of antelope, it's actually surprisingly a lot rougher than it looks. Just in the same way that elephants are a lot bristlier than one might think. Vincent, there is the possibility of a topi facing a predator head-on, but it is unlikely. So there are certain antelope, and buffalo are another example, that a fair amount of the time might actually turn around and try and face their attacker, usually as a last resort. But yes, a big adult topi might chase away a female cheetah, for example. They might try and fight back, particularly when they aren't left with any other option. There are other antelope, larger antelope, things like oryx or gemsbok, that have those spear-like horns that stick out of the top of their head, an antelope that I dream of being able to show you one day. And even though we're going to be joined by our crew in South Africa later, not an antelope you will be seeing on this live safari. Sable are another good example. Sable also fight back, and sable can actually be quite terrifying. Two of the relatively scariest charges I've experienced were sable. Once on horseback and once on foot, and both times I was totally taken aback by the experience of being charged by an antelope almost as large as the horse I was riding, with massive curved horns. In answer to what I did on the back of the horse and to face that charge, I would love to say I bravely stood my ground, but as it was, the horse was quite badly trained. I'm quite an inept rider, and we turned tail, whether I wanted to or not. That was completely beyond my control. There was no option there. Quite a scary charge. Roan will also fight back. So the biggest species of antelope might. Buffalo, we know, not now moving out of the antelope category. Giraffe will fight back. Hippopotamus will fight back. Anything will fight. It's just that once you get smaller than a topi sized, they don't really stand a chance when they fight back against most predators. I mean, you saw that little Thompson's gazelle. That was the most incredible sighting. I'm not sure who it was. Was it Taylor? I think it was Taylor, who was across the river, and a jackal went for a baby Thompson's gazelle, and Mum came back and protected it and chased the jackal away. Okay. Slow safaris. I can see the baboons. I knew I heard some barking. Adrian, look, there are the baboons all the way across the front part of my bonnet, complete with a zebra as well. Can you see them there? All the way across, straight in front of us, on the opposite side of the ridge. That wasn't very nice, baboons. I was really hoping to do a segment on you since I, can't go anywhere. Well, I can go plenty of places, just really slowly. It's the sort of rough equivalent of driving in a tractor. At least I was stuck in A gear. There we go, some baboons moving across. You can see the big male in the middle there. That macho swagger that they have. And I mean that quite literally. It's quite clear in their tracks as well, the way that they walk. Now, I don't know if the size 7 baboon is still wandering around Djuma, but it was one of Herbie's favourite things to point out the size 7 baboon tracks on quarantine when we were walking to and from. Quarantine, by the way, for our new viewers, and Djuma, these are places in South Africa. It's where our South African crew will be joining us from. And quarantine is a clearing that is outside the camp. And Herbie used to love referencing the size 7 baboon because his feet were bigger than mine. I'm terribly curious to see what all of those cars have collected around down there, because they have just suddenly materialized. So I'm going to go and find out what they're looking at. Ralph, meanwhile, has got a different turn of speed, and luckily he can travel towards the Great Mara River.
Thanks, Jamie. And yes, we've also just heard through the Bush Telegraph that there are some lions in the area. So we're going to make our way in that direction, but we're going to be stopping and popping in at all the river crossings. So we're just here at the first one. This is called Hippo Pools. It's not always ideal from this position because the hippo pool's a little bit further downstream, and that's where the hippos actually are. A little bit difficult for us to see through the thickets here, but always worth just popping in and see if there's anything in our view. And the Mara River did come up in the last 2 or 3 days, but it seems to have receded once more, going back a little bit into its box. So let's just have a quick look here. There doesn't seem to be too much around. We always just need to stop. Got a couple of the boo-boos calling, bird calls. We can hear some of them coming through the forest, but you won't be able to hear them. I'm just trying to convey the scene that we're noticing here, but not too much happening at the moment. There's no big animals around, so I think we are going to continue along down the road. Now, Buttons, you want to know if there's any diseases contracted here in the Mara, like foot and mouth, what is done about it? I'm pretty sure that it would be monitored, because obviously they could, for instance, be able to contain it within the greater Mara area. So with these kind of diseases, the biggest threat is the outbreak, and for it affecting a lot of populations in the greater area. So, I mean, even like foot and mouth, it's actually not a particularly bad disease. It's just very contagious. That's the only thing. So, for them to try and stop it, they do try and separate different areas. For instance, like in Botswana, running through into Namibia, where they put this very big blockage, really, of migratory routes, but it stops the mingling of domestic livestock and the wildlife, and this transferal then of free radical diseases, if you want to say it like that. So I'm pretty sure that there would be some intervention here in the Mara, but I'm sure Jamie would know a little bit better than me. So we'll maybe transfer that question over to her, because she's a little bit more local than I am. But for instance, in the Kruger National Park, I know that they would try and get involved. They would get the vets in. They would be establishing where the disease is sort of the epicenter of it, and try and contain it from there. And then there can be quite big culling as a result of diseases like that, like you get with swine flu, bird flu. They try to contain that in a specific area. It's also quite prevalent in the northern parts of the Kruger National Park. They have a lot of anthrax, which is a very big problem there. But the research being done, especially with vultures, because they're one of the transferers of anthrax, but also one of the inhibitors, because they digest it. So anthrax being transferred through spores, it's like almost like mushrooms, but very prevalent when the water levels drop. Wow, we just watched some of these Thompson's gazelle bound through the water here. But they are just moving off now into the thickets. Here, I'll just stop quickly, because we have been looking at some birds. And here, the other day, we saw some Egyptian geese, but they had tiny little chicks. These chicks here seems have got very good parents, because they've been able to do pretty well. And most of them, I would say, have survived through to adolescence. And then I'm sure that most of them will also then go through to adult. So I think there's been a number of guides stopping with these ones. But the other day, not far from here, we had Egyptian geese with tiny little chicks. And I think that was either yesterday morning or the morning before. But nice to see that they're doing pretty well. You know, in areas around South Africa, we have noticed that there's been a real increase in the population of Egyptian geese. And I haven't read anything on it or anything like that, but my particular theory on it is that there is a very big decrease in the numbers of the Cape clawless otters, with people moving into their areas. You know, they frequent rivers and the river banks, and everybody wants to have a house by the river, or, you know, a house by the lake. And so most people move in, they put up their house, and they bring their pets with them, which is mostly dogs. And I think dogs are one of the biggest contributors to the decrease in numbers of Cape clawless otters. And once again, we take out that apex predator, which I would say in freshwater systems around South Africa, and some even going into other African countries, is the Cape clawless otter. Take him out of the system, and you disturb the balance. And so we've got a massive increase of Egyptian geese, to the point where there are literally thousands of them on the freshwater systems now, the Vaal River, the Orange River. And so they're actually becoming a big problem, because they are overpopulating, and I'm 100% sure, but you're welcome to prove me wrong, that it's because of the decrease in numbers of the Cape clawless otter. But anyway, that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it unless proved otherwise. But let's continue along with that news that there's some lions nearby. But I'll take a little bit of speed as I go through this section towards the Inselbergs and down towards the river. But while we take that speed, let's head you on over to Jamie, who's going nice and slowly.
Lovely and slowly, but fortunately there's always something to see. And in this particular case, it is an elephant having the best possible time. It's a hot afternoon, perfect afternoon for a mud bath. He's finished his mud bath, and now he's going to have a jolly good scratch. Now, I know that Ralph actually showed you this elephant a little bit earlier, but I just had to stop and show you what he's up to now. You can see all of the fresh mud plastered up the trunk of that tree. I've been talking about different ways of getting rid of parasites. There's a good way as well. Often when you walk up to those mud scratches on trees, you'll find ticks embedded in the drying mud. Oh, there's the spot. Right up against the ear. Now behind the ear, the shoulder. He's done obviously one side, now it's off to the other side, and he's draped his trunk lazily over his tusk. The picture of calm and carefree, and unconcerned with the drama of the world at large. All that matters to this big bull elephant is a comfortable mud bath, a nice good scratch, all those itchy bits, and then possibly some food along the way. Now he's onto his side. Carly says, yay, she loves Ellie's. I'm glad to hear it. I love Ellie's too. I promised now it's bottom scratch time. I promised I'd steal this saying, but a day without Ellie's is a day wasted. Now the back foot, the ankle, the heel. There we go, jolly good scratch. There we go, a little bit of extra there. Oh, you can see where the mud's been plastered. Wendy's worried if there was too much mud, could it potentially kill the tree? No, the outside part of the bark is pretty much unimportant to the tree except as a barrier. So it gets obviously all of its oxygen. Well, it actually releases it releases oxygen during the day. So all of the gaseous exchange occurs through the leaves, and the transport of water through the roots, and the layers that it transports water through and food through is all underneath that top layer of hardened lignified bark, in a layer called the cambium layer. So that won't harm the tree, but if you were to strip away the bark completely, then yes, you could kill the tree, especially if you do something known as ring barking to it, which elephants do. Look at this elephant. He's just having the best time. Oh, he has left no wrinkle unscratched. Now it's the cheek time. And a little bit of the forehead. He's obviously got his eye tightly shut so that he doesn't rub his eye. There we go, top of the nose. There's the cheekbone again. Oh, there we go, the eye. Now he's going to scratch the front. Now, looking at our Ellie, Hannah would like to know what diseases could affect elephants. Elephants are pretty hardy when it comes to diseases. They do get their own. There's a special type of tick-borne parasite that does affect elephants. For the life of me, I can't remember the name. Oh, there we go, under the trunk now. But they otherwise have a largely quite resilient immune system. And nap time. Just gonna stand here. Sorry, I'll get back to elephant diseases in a moment. He's just so comfortable. Now, what you'll find when we talk about diseases is a number of diseases are actually far more, or a number of problems with elephants actually usually arrive with elephants in captivity. Oh, there we go. Something like arthritis, for example, where elephants are stuck in a concrete enclosure, they're standing when they're in a zoo or in a circus or wherever they happen to be. Then they get things like arthritis. It's stuff that's very, very seldom seen within wild elephant populations. They do get TB. They can get tuberculosis as well. I'm not sure if they get foot and mouth disease. I'm sure they also get a number of different types of skin problems. But I'm not an expert in the various elephant diseases that they get. I just want to see. I've blocked up the whole road. Sorry, I'm going to have to, for a change. How many times have I said that recently? I must remember to keep parking on the side. Oh, I'm in low range. Slowly, slowly. Jamie's slow safari. No, Elephants doesn't seem too bothered. He's having a slow afternoon as well. So he's quite happy. Anthrax is another disease that elephants will get. Sorry, I'm thinking off the top of my head. Anthrax, elephants do get anthrax. Obviously, anthrax presents itself in different forms, in pulmonary forms, in affecting the GIT tract, the stomach and the intestines. And those are the sort of main diseases that you're looking at. Here we go. He's moved on from scratching now that he's well and truly covered that tree. Layered it up in mud. Now it's time for a bit of a snack. And speaking of time to decide what our plans are, I'm going to try and figure out where I can go at a very slow pace. Let's go across to Rolf, who has had the opportunity to move, and he's found you some baboons.
Thanks, Jamie. It sounds like you're moving very slowly through that area there, but that's good as well, because you get to spot lots of things when you're going slowly. Sometimes it's the better option. But look at these baboons. They're all foraging through this field here. Looks like there's some kind of seed dispersal, I think. It's either seeds or it's insects that's on the ground, but it looks like with the speed that they're going at it, I don't know if it's insects, it might be termites, but there's a real lot of feeding going on, whatever it is. I don't know if any of you have ever tried tasting a termite. Very much like peanut butter. They're quite tasty, whether fresh or fried or grilled on the fire. They do then shrivel up though a little bit, so they're better to take just as is. But it's quite interesting to note that we can't eat as humans everything that baboons eat, because some of the things that they eat would be toxic to us. So their stomach has a different kind of acid in it. But if you watch monkeys, you can pretty much eat everything that monkeys eat. And I know it was a little while ago when we were watching vervet monkeys in Djuma eating mushrooms, and I said to James, well, that's a good indication that we would be able to eat them, but he wasn't so sure. He wasn't willing to test that theory. But it's wonderful to watch as they're all foraging through. There's so much going on. I really do love watching baboons. Now, Liquid, you want to know how smart are baboons? Well, that's always a very good question, because how do you measure intelligence? And with all the primates, they have a very high capacity to learn. So for me, that is a very good indication of intelligence, as well as the fact that from the infant to the adult, they have a very big increase in brain mass. So for me, they are very intelligent, part of the primate family. They're able to use tools, and I have watched baboons putting sticks down termite nests and pulling them all out as they try to defend their nest, and then eating them all off of it. But they are highly intelligent, and they're often hanging around impala because they use the impala's alertness to their advantage, and so they can carry on grazing like they are and moving through. Now, Hannah, you want to know if baboons have a matriarchal system like hyenas? Hannah, no, it's actually a little bit more male-orientated, and so we call it an oligarchy, as opposed to a matriarchy being one elite female running a group, like with elephants, and opposed to a patriarchy, which is one male running a group. So, for instance, something like a herd of zebra with a stallion. But with baboons, it's called an oligarchy. So it's a group of elite males that run the entire group. There probably is a small dominant structure within that group of males, because they would probably, if fighting for one particular female, there would be one that would dominate. But it's very easy to see with baboons, whether it's male or female. You look at those very bare patches on their backside, and if they're very pink like that, that is the females. And then when we see the males, you'll see that it's very dark patches that they used to sit on. And the redness on the females, the redder, the more they are trying to attract a mate, and you can very clearly see it on the females. And sometimes it actually looks like it's an open wound. That's how red it becomes. It's blood red, and the redder the backside, the more that they are potentially seeking to mate. But they are so human-like in many ways. They often sit like a little Buddha and almost in the thinking pose. And they allo-groom and very terrestrial are baboons, as opposed to a lot of the primates that are more arboreal or tree dwellers. Now, First Lady, you'd like to know what is the difference between baboons and monkeys? Are they related? Well, yes, they are related, but obviously there is a slight difference in them, in that the baboons being a lot larger and of the Papio genus, so they are cousins. But I'm going to just dig in my bag and look in my tracking book. I just want to show you a little bit of the difference in their foot structure, especially around baboons being a little bit more terrestrial and the monkeys being a little bit more arboreal or tree dwellers. But they're also quite adept on the ground, but not anything like the baboons. So Craig's going to come back here, and I'm going to show you my very well used tracking book. Now, on the right, we have a reduced size of a baboon feet. This is the back foot, and obviously quite similar to that of the vervet monkey, but the front foot is the key with baboons. And you look at that, we get a very big B that comes here, and this hand is very similar to that of humans, but very often we also see them walking on their knuckles. So you can see these 4 toes here with very often just this back pad, and you miss that thumb. So you can actually think that it is one of the predators if you see one in a little bit difficult substrate. But we say with baboons, front foot being a B, and the front foot of a vervet monkey giving a very clear V. So V for vervet, B for baboon, but on the vervet monkey with the front foot, and sorry if I'm jumping around there, Craig, it's a very clear, similar to the back foot of a vervet monkey. So, and obviously from this picture it doesn't really give you the size, but the baboon foot is more or less double the size of a vervet monkey. So that's just a little bit on the difference between a vervet monkey and a baboon. There is a whole number of different factors as well, but we'll get into that maybe on a different sighting. Right, for now I'm going to continue on down towards the river crossings, see if we can find those lions. But while we do that, let's head you on back to Slowtown, Jamie.
No, we are still with our... No, we're not. We're with a different elephant bull, not still with the same elephant bull that we were with earlier. And he's been such a gentleman, but now, unfortunately, he's actually moved across behind us, and now I'm stuck behind him. And what that means, for those of you who are unfamiliar with elephant behavior, Ellies don't really like it when you follow directly behind them. You can do it, and you can give them a great deal of space, and then they'll be perfectly comfortable with it. But if I continue to drive up along this road behind him, if he doesn't move off the road, all he's going to do is just get more and more irritated, and you get that sort of backwards over the shoulder glance from them as they're wandering along, and they feel pushed. And they feel like they are obliged to move faster or obliged to move off the road. They don't really like it. When you're following a whole herd down the road, it's different, but it's particularly these lone bulls that tend to find it a bit frustrating. So I'm not going to follow him all the way down the road. He's been so polite with us, and he came right up close and fed on the grass next to us. I'm just going to let him wander on his way. And a good afternoon to Hannah. Now, Hannah, you want to know if bull elephants mark their territory. They do not. The reason being is that elephants are not territorial in the slightest. Now, of course, as you will know, they live in breeding herds, which consists of females and related offspring. And then you get to the bulls. Now, the males move out of the herd when they reach sexual maturity, sometimes stay together in groups, particularly when they're younger. Sometimes they'll move and they'll spend some time with an adult male, a big bull, to help to teach them all about being an elephant bull. But they will actually often, especially over the age of around about 30, 35, move about on their own, but they are not territorial. So what you'll see is, as we go down in here, you're going to encounter more and more elephants. There are lots around this area. And you'll see there's no real friction. That's the lovely thing about elephants. There's no territorial battles. The only time that elephant bulls fight is to fight over the potential mating rights with one female, and even then you need to get two equally matched big male elephants and a female in estrus. Otherwise, for the most part, the battles are decided without any kind of physical contact. One male is just naturally bigger, older, more experienced than the other, and he will be the one that fights, that gets to mate with her. That's not always the case. Sometimes a younger bull or a smaller bull in must, which is a condition where their testosterone levels go right up through the roof, and they get a little bit more aggressive, a bit more pushy, and a bit more intently focused on the ladies. And in those circumstances, then you might find that they might win a battle with an older, more experienced male just by sheer aggression. There's also research to suggest that females actually prefer to mate with males in must. But other than that, there are no real serious conflicts within elephant groups. I'm just going to go around here and then I'll show you what I found. Slow safaris! Woohoo! Oh, shame. They are so hot. Busy plucking grass seeds off a pair of guinea fowl. Helmeted guinea fowl. Not difficult to see where the name helmeted comes from. You can see they've got a little helmet on the tops of their heads. And I said, oh shame, they're so hot, because I can actually see them panting in the afternoon heat. Okay, let's see what they're up to. Now, first lady, you want to know about guinea fowl egg laying. They will lay their eggs on the ground, preferably somewhere very, very well hidden. The interesting thing about guinea fowl is that they actually, hold on a sec, they're going to vanish, aren't they, Adrian? Just beyond your boundaries. Hold on, let me just reposition. Interesting thing about the guinea fowl, if I remember correctly, pretty sure they have the hardest eggs proportionate to their size of any of the bird species out here. How's that for a random fact? They also based the motion of the Tyrannosaurus Rex running in Jurassic Park. They based that on the movement of the guinea fowl. See the way that they lay their egg? Oh, lay their eggs. Gosh, what's wrong with me? You see the way they... Wow. That was a serious amount of dirt you had there in your feathers. They're moving impressively quickly. That one obviously had a dust bath. So a guinea fowl nest might not necessarily be in the ground, on the ground. It might also be tucked away in bushes on sort of low levels, somewhere where it's nice and safe for them. So they want to hide their nest away as much as possible. Did you have a nice dust bath? Unfortunately, everything just wants to walk behind me at the moment. I'm starting to take it personally. The elephant, guinea fowl. So a dust bath like that, talking about various methods of keeping away ticks and parasites, it's a way of dislodging the external parasites, mites on their feathers and so on, that they might have collected walking through the grass. Now, speaking of animals walking through the grass and collecting parasites, there is one that does a lot of walking through grass, and Rolf has managed to find some for you.
Well, yes, they can do a lot of walking, but Jamie, these, as suspected, these lions are lying up in the shade with it being nice and hot this afternoon, and there does seem to be reasonably fat bellies, so coupled with the heat, probably a bit of digesting going on, and that's why there's quite a bit of panting. And so with it being nice and hot, and with there being reasonably fat bellies, the lion's most common position is exactly that. So 3 females, and we're wondering if this is the part of the Paradise Pride. I haven't seen them on this side of the river, but we're in the same area that we have spotted them on the other side, so quite easily be them. It seems there are a few more up ahead, and so we'll go and investigate in a minute. Maybe there'll be some males around, who knows? Maybe we'll even find the musketeers, because there are some lions up front. And I haven't identified whether it's males or females, but we've managed to find these females, which is quite nice. Now, Vincent, thanks for commenting and saying that lions are your favorite. Well, they're one of my favorite as well, Vincent. Except generally we do find them in this kind of position, and so it's very nice and very obliging of this female just to lift her head up for us, so that we can see her eyes a little bit and see her face before she goes back down into her slumber, which I don't think will be too long. Ooh, she's gracing us by sitting up. Thank you. She's got a bit of a scratch on her nose, but that's generally to do with feeding, and between lions there's lots of nails and claws that get smacked into each other, so very common to see lions with scratches all over their nose like that, because they do fight quite incessantly around a carcass. Even though they're in a very good team, they still do hurt each other quite a lot when they're busy feeding. Lots of arguments over who's going to get what piece of the animal. Oh, and she's just taken herself into a little bit of better shade there. Now, Dale, you want to know if a pregnant lioness will still join in on the hunt. Dale, as far as I know, they pretty much go on with the hunting and continue with their normal activity right up to just before they actually give birth, which is when they separate themselves. And it's actually quite difficult with a lot of predators to see when they're pregnant, because they don't really show it too much. And sometimes you can think that they've just gorged themselves full of food, because you don't really get to see it that much. But when it is time for the female to give birth, she will separate herself, normally go and find a very secluded spot, and like a lot of animals in the wild and all around the world, that little moment when a female gives birth, she isolates herself, and that is the time for once the babies are born, the mother and the babies imprint each other's smells, sounds, and visuals on each other and on each other's brain. And sometimes it can be quite an extended period, even up to a month, that they stay isolated from their gregarious or sociable group before rejoining them. And at that stage, then the bond has been forged between mom and cubs or babies or calves or whatever it might be. And then from there on out, very easily identify each other. But yes, with predators, quite difficult to see them in pregnant stage, actually, and easily identifiable. It's quite similar with hyena as well. They almost don't show it at all. So, yeah. But yes, they do continue on with the hunt, and very soon after that stage with the cubs, they can also go hunting. Now, CNAC, you want to know how long they can go without food? CNAC, it depends on how much they've eaten prior to not going going without food. So, for instance, if they had to eat a warthog, a piglet each, so that's quite a small bit of prey. They could potentially have to eat every day if they ate a little warthog. But if they had to, for instance, kill a buffalo, and they gorge themselves and have fat bellies, they could go 5-7 days, depending on how much they ate. But I've seen some lions that they fed on a giraffe, and they went for 7 days before hunting again. But you should have seen how large they looked after eating on that giraffe. Their bellies were basically scraping on the ground. They could hardly move. They were like fat gluttons. But it was wonderful to see, because a fat lion is a happy lion, as I always say. So everyone, these lions not particularly doing too much, as we suspected, in this heat and with their reasonably fat bellies. So I think we might start up and just head up down the road and see what else we can find. I think there might be some more lions just up over there, because there's a lot of people stopping and looking. So let's go on and have a look. I'm really hoping that we can find the musketeers. So, because the musketeers and maybe even potentially Scar be very exciting. I haven't seen those lions. So I'm going to try and get in here and get a nice position for us, a nice view, see which lions there are. But while we're doing that, let's head you on back to Jamie, who I think is still putting along.
I'm just bumbling along, trying to figure out where the road's gone that I once knew. I think I've missed the road that I wanted to turn off, but that's because this entire area has just become a sand deposit, and there's no way to see where the old original road is. I suppose it doesn't really matter. I didn't necessarily need to be on that road. It was the idea I had in my head, but let's face it, half the time my direction is dictated by the mud anyway, so I might as well continue along this path. Yesterday something similar happened, where we dodged some baby Coqui Franklins and ended up finding a serval, so it often works out in one's favor. It's definitely dried out really nicely here though. Now Coco, you want to know if we get meerkats in the Mara. We do not. One of those terrible factual inaccuracies that the Lion King has to answer for. I'm joking, the Lion King wasn't set in the Mara, but it was not set all that far away from here. And no, there are no meerkats here. Meerkats you will find, or suricats, you will find in desert areas in the Kalahari, so much more arid areas. What you will find here is a relatively close relative of the meerkat, and that is actually several different species of mongoose. Hey, this is really nasty bumps here. And some more. We get several different species of mongoose. We get the banded mongoose, and I'm actually going to go and check and see if those babies that we found a few days ago happen to be out again, or if they're around. And you get the dwarf mongoose. Those are both social mongoose species, like meerkats. Oh gosh. Dare I try this? Or you get the more solitary species of mongoose, like for example the water mongoose and the white-tailed mongoose, both solitary nocturnal species of mongoose. But you do not, unfortunately, get meerkats. And you will not see meerkats once our South African crew joins us either. Because although there are meerkats in South Africa, they are not in the greater Kruger area, and that's where our friends will be joining us from a little bit later. This is basically one just has to hope, because with my, at least I'm in low range, but with the selector broken, I can't put my diff lock on. So if we go in, we go in. It's actually quite nice. I'm having a great time driving along at this speed. Plenty to see. Whoa. I was going to say plenty of control, but I think that might be speaking too soon. While I navigate the load of holes that are in front of me, let's go across to Rolf, who's repositioned for a better view of his lions.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, it's not a perfect view because of the heat at the moment, but we've spotted a male lion, and I think there's some more in the grass as well. But I have an inkling that this might be the musketeers. So we might sit here a little bit longer and just see and try and work out exactly who this is, because there's more than one male here. Well, at least more than one lion, but we can see one male at least, with that punk hairstyle there sticking out from a croton bush. So I wonder if not here in the grass there's another couple. So I'm going to maybe just roll forward slowly just to see if we can spot another one. Let's just go forward. We'll even get a better view of that one slightly. And now he's behind the grass. You're not getting a particularly good view here, but at least we can see him a bit better. I'm just wondering if there's not a lion here in the long grass. Anyway, as I say, if this is the musketeers, it would be the first time that I've spotted them, and I'd love for them just to stand up or so. But after this, we will be heading down to the river crossing, and then we'll be returning when it is a bit cooler. So we have every chance of seeing them maybe being a little bit more active. But for now, if you didn't know, well, that's just a little tuft of hair that's moving behind a croton bush. But yes, it is indeed a male lion. You wouldn't think it, would you? Look at that. You see that from a distance? Would you know that that's a lion? Now, so well camouflaged, even with that massive mane and a frame of theirs, over 200 kilograms some of them get to. So that's pretty much heading towards 500 pounds. They have some heavy weight on them, the male lions do, when they're in their prime. And wonderful specimens of animals to see. But not that we're seeing too much of this one. He's really trying his best to get into that little bit of shade that is poking out from behind that croton bush. And, well, that's it for lions in the heat of the day sometimes. You generally don't get to see them doing too much, hey? Right, there's not too much happening here, not really too much reason for us to stick around looking at a bit of hair sticking out from the bush. So we're going to head down towards the river crossing, see if there's any action with the hippos and the crocodiles, maybe something coming down to drink, who knows, maybe some lovely birds, and we'll make our way back up this side to see if these lions are becoming a little bit more active. So don't go anywhere, everyone. There'll be lots of action a little bit later on in the show. And while we reposition down on towards the river, let's head you on over to Jamie and see how she's getting on.
I'm getting on just fine, thank you. As long as I don't fall into these ruts, I should be absolutely fine. And I'm sort of banking on the same assumption that Rolf is, and that's that the lions are going to get active as the day starts to cool down a little bit. And hopefully what that means for us is we will be able to see where the olololos have disappeared to, that they've managed to keep evading us all day long, and everyone else who's been looking for them, because there have been lots of people on the hunt for the olololo lions. Now, they are somewhere. Okay, wait a second. We're going to do this. Scarlet, I really want to see a striped hyena. That is way up there on my list of animals that I would like to see. So Scarlet's asking about what animal we'd like to see in the Mara that we haven't yet. And I've said a striped hyena. I would also always add to that list an aardvark, which unfortunately I might have to wait until the wildebeest come back, because at least they... No. At least they shorten the grass. Nearly went into the wrong ruts there. Am I going to get into the right ruts? One wonders. There we go, that should be okay. Come on, need the back of the car up. There we go. Now the funny story, Scarlet, behind the aardvark is that I have never seen an aardvark. I have been on aardvark captures. I have been to a place, worked on a place, a reserve world famous for aardvark, and I have never ever seen one. It's some sort of, every time it's happened, I've either been taking that one break while I've been driving in the car, whatever it happens to be. I'm asleep, I'm busy talking to someone, helping someone. Somehow I've always missed I've seen pangolin multiple times before, but aardvark have escaped me. It's some kind of curse I have. I don't know why that is. I'd also really like to share, we've seen them, so it doesn't quite answer your question, but I'd really like to share a nice bat-eared fox sighting with you. That's what I would really like to do. The only times we've seen them, they have been dashing away. And you just see their bottoms disappearing and then looking back at us. I would love to share a nice sighting of a bat-eared fox. We've put spring hair on camera. Let me think. There might be something that I've left out. I'm trying to think what else I haven't seen in the Mara yet. I haven't seen a caracal. Let's go and find out from Ralph what animal he would like to see in the Mara that he hasn't yet seen.
Thanks, Jamie. And, well, I think one of the animals I would like to see is a pangolin. And that is something that I always want to see, and everywhere I go. I've only seen one in my life, and I nearly drove it over, and because it was on the tar road heading towards Etosha National Park, and I was on my way to pick up some guests in the early hours of the morning, and it scuttled across the road in front of me. I slammed on anchors and nearly had an accident in the process, but managed to avoid hitting the pangolin. And as I stopped, I just had enough time to see it scuttling off into the bushes. But at least he was safe, and I got to see him. But look at these hippos having a lovely little fight here, probably a bit of a play fight. I'm not quite sure yet if it is a play fight or not, but let's watch and see. Very wide mouths. Hungry hippos, as they say. Who can open their mouth the widest? And lots of playtime. So that's why I often like coming down to the rivers when it's very hot, because obviously the animals that are in and around the water keeping cool, so there can be a little bit more activity. And from our flat cats to these very active hippos, everyone trying to open their mouth wider than the next. It looks like it might be a female and a couple of, or two young males and a female. They'll only do that for so long until the dominant male comes and chases them away. He'll tolerate that for only so long. See that darkness around the eye of the one on the left? That's a very good indicator of a male. And the one that was closest to us, very pink around the eyes. That's very indicative of a female. There's quite a lot of argy-bargy going on. So it doesn't just happen with the young male elephants. It can also happen between the hippos. So yes, animals that I want to see in the Mara. It's a side-striped jackal as well. Now, Steve, you want to know if it's true that hippos kill more people than lions do? Yes, Steve, that is absolutely 100% correct. And it's mostly to do with people being on or near to the water and not respecting the rules of the hippos, which is to mostly and most importantly keep away from being in between a hippo and its safe zone. So if a hippo is out of water, you don't want to come between a hippo and the water, because very often it seems like they're charging at you, but they're actually just charging to get back to the water. And then when you are in the water, whether it's on a boat or on the bank, you need to watch the hippos and stay away from any territorial males, because they will obviously defend their territory, and if they've got females with youngsters, they'll be quite protective about that. And with them being such big animals, you can very easily understand that a very big male could literally snap a boat in half with one bite. And I've seen some hippo damage on boats. It's quite remarkable how much damage they can do. And I've had a couple of run-ins with hippos when I've been fishing myself, and it's not fun because they are very fast moving in the water. You know, they go to the bottom and they run on the bottom, and before you know it, they're right on top of you. So you might see them go underwater 50 meters away, and then they come up right next to you. And here it's all fun and games, but if a hippo is doing this on your boat, you very easily flip it, and once you're in the water, you're a goner. So yes, they do kill lots of people, and it's not to eat them in any way whatsoever. They're completely vegetarian grazers, moving out into the grass at night, very much like cows, and feeding on very nice lush grass. And that's all they do, but they are a little bit different to cows in that their digestive system a little bit closer to that of rhino, but they're actually different to all of them. They're not hind gut fermenters, they're almost a front gut fermenter, and so their dung smells completely different to rhino, elephant, warthog, zebra, and it's almost a little bit slimy. It's actually got quite a pungent smell, and I think it might have to do with their particular fermentation process that it goes through. But hippos, quite territorial. When they go out the water, they've got this very short, fleshy tail, and they normally walk past bushes on their normal sort of route that they take, and they will then spray their dung over particular bushes along their territorial route that they go on during the night, and so that's the way that they mark their territories. So speaking of hindgut fermenters and big fat bellies, let's head you on down all the way to Noel in South Africa with one of those small animals that has got a fat belly as well.
Oh my goodness, everyone, good afternoon. Look at the uber cuteness we have found for you to start our drive from Djuma in the Sabi Sands in South Africa. I don't know how long they're going to nurse for, so I think we're going to stick with them for a little bit while we have them, because warthogs never sit still this long, and you hardly ever get to see them nursing. Oop. The wind picked up and scared that little one there. His litter mates are like, ha ha ha, it's all ours now. They were pushing each other out of the way earlier. It was absolutely cute, absolutely adorable. Well done. All right, everyone, and welcome again. My name is Noelle, and this is Safari Live. We are interactive. You can follow us, hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or on the YouTube chat. And on camera, I have Davi. Hello, Davi. And that, to me, has to be one of the best ways to start a show. I mean, look at them. They are probably, if any of you know those little teacup pigs, that's how big these little piglets are. They're little teacup pig size. Now, the wind is coming softly and then blowing hard and then soft and then hard. And so because they're so teeny and they can barely see above the grass, they get super and smell correctly. Oh my goodness, and I am so rude. I have to welcome the schools. I'm sorry, kids. Hi, everyone. Hi, Red Bank Elementary and Allenton Elementary. I'm so happy to have you with us, and I'm really hoping you enjoyed those little warthogs there. Those are little Pumbas. So Pumbaa is Swahili for warthog, and up in the Masai Mara, where Ralph is at the moment, that's where they speak Swahili. Down here we call them a hunchi or ungulube. There's other names for them as well, or a flakvarkie, a field pig, and then of course they're also known as a warthog because of the warts on the side of their faces. So everybody, I'm glad to have you with us. The past few times that I've been on drive when there's been a school drive. You've all had lots of snow, so I hope that you enjoy, and don't forget, you can send through all your questions with your teachers. Now, my friend Jamie is up in the Masai Mara in Kenya, which is about 1,600 miles away from us, and she has a very large mammal species that she would like to show to you, so let's head on up to her and see what it's all about.
I would love to show you my large mammal, and much like Noelle, I'm very excited to say hello to the kids joining us today, and a very good afternoon from here. For you it'll be the morning, but for us it is late evening. Now, Noelle's told you that she is in South Africa. I am in a place called the Masai Mara, and that's in Kenya, so that's half a continent away on the eastern side of Africa. And we are with this lovely herd of elephants with some birds around them as well. Now, kids, because this is happening right here and right now, what that means for you is that you have to think up the best possible questions that you can imagine about what it is you're seeing and the animals of Africa. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to get all of those questions answered. And what we have here is what we call officially a breeding herd of elephants. And basically what that means, how that translates, is it is a group of female elephants, and they are all related to each other: mothers, daughters, cousins, aunts, sisters, and all of their youngsters, so their young babies, just like this little mischievous thing that you can see hiding behind the bushes. And what you can see on these elephants, and that little one especially, is that they have been enjoying a mud bath. This one's running in between the legs of the various females. Look at this. How lovely. Lots of affection here between the various members of the herd. So even though it might not be her baby, they are still so gentle. Now, Aiden, what a very good question. Now, Aiden wants to know if elephants are native to Africa, oh, cute, and how long they have been here for. Now, that is a really good question because we do actually get different types or different species of elephant. Now, these elephants, the savanna elephants, and you will see there's another car there, these savanna elephants, or known as the African bush elephant, they are native to Africa, and so are the African forest elephants that live in the forests of Africa. And you also, of course, get elephants in Asia as well. So the Asian elephant is something that we don't get here, but is something that you will find elsewhere in Asia. So we get different types. As for how long they have been here, that is a really good question, and I don't know what date this particular species of elephant came about in Africa at this time. You'll have to look that up for me. Now, Charlie, you want to know how long do elephants live for? Charlie, elephants can live... Oh, look, sorry. Adrian, look at this little baby. It was chasing... Oh, it stopped now. I was just a little bit too late. No, there we go. It's chasing birds. And the birds are running after it. And then the baby turns around and chases them because the birds are trying to catch insects. And the elephant is just getting irritated that they're there. There, look, watch. Sorry, I'll tell you about how long elephants live in a second. Here they come. Is he going to chase them again? There we go. Oh, swinging its head around. There's another one. You missed one. There's another one right there. So elephants can live for the males up to around about 50, sometimes a little bit older than that, even up to 60 years old. The females can live up to 70 years old. So elephants can live pretty much almost as long as a human being. So they live for a very, very long time. Now that little youngster over there, that little elephant calf, if it's a female, it will stay with this elephant herd for that entire time. There's going to chase the bird again. No, now it wants to walk up to mum. So just think about that. During that time, if it's a female, and I actually think it might be a male, if it's a female, it will spend that entire time with this elephant herd. It will see its mum die, and then it will have daughters of its own, and it will have sisters and cousins, and spend that entire time ensconced in the safety of the herd. So while we watch our very special elephants here, let's jump all the way back across to South Africa to join Scott, who has got one of the most beautiful antelope in the world.
Hello everyone, and a special welcome to everyone who has just joined us on the Nat Geo Wild page, as well as another special welcome to the kids at Red Bank and Allenton Elementary Schools. We've got lucky and stumbled upon some kudu who are quenching their thirst at the waterhole. My name's Scott and I'm teamed up with Seb on camera. This is a bit one of our devices over here on the left. It's a drone, so we may deploy that a little bit later, but it may get in the way, just to let you know what that is. Let's take a look. It looks like there may be some more kudu coming down to the water's edge. I was quite surprised to only see two. Usually they do move in slightly larger herds than this. Now look at the one in the middle. It's a young male, and it keeps looking very, very intently into the water, and I think it's just trying to make sure that there's no crocodiles trying to sneak up on them, because the kudu can't be certain whether or not there are any crocodiles in any given body of water. And it's not just the crocodiles they're going to be cautious of while they come down to the water's edge, but also of other predators like lion and leopard that could ambush them. Wonderful. It looks like this female is quite heavily pregnant. Her belly looks quite large. Well, maybe not too heavily pregnant, but she certainly does seem to be carrying a youngster there. Oriona, you would like to know if there are many different animal species in Africa, and yes, there are many. Too many for me to even hazard a guess at, but there are many different types of mammals, insects, birds, reptiles, you name it. And I guess it's fair to say there's a large amount of animals on most continents. The reason why I guess you may not find a lot in and around the cities is because, of course, us humans have taken all of their habitat. Whereas here, where we live alongside the animals and where the bush is as it was many, many years ago, you tend to find quite a wide and diverse array of different species. Now the kudu are quite lucky. They live a lot of their time is spent in quite thick vegetation, and that's why they've got very, very big ears, and they're definitely using those ears to try and make sure that there is nothing creeping up on them. In thick vegetation like this, it can be quite useful to listen out rather than trying to see the predators. Very good. We're going to send you back to Noel.
Just there, we've got more warthog that have run off. It's a little group of males, and what they were doing just as we arrived here is they were cooling themselves down in the heat of the day. It's quite warm today, and just behind me I've got this really amazing mud pan, and this is what they were rolling in. So could you imagine when you all get hot that you have to go jump in that mud pan and cover yourselves in mud? Not only does it cool them down, but it also helps them get rid of any parasites that are on their bodies. It suffocates them, and then they go and they scratch them off. Nadia, you'd like to know, at what age do the Pumbas start living on their own? When they're about a year to 2 years. It depends. So the males kind of start going off around a year and a half-ish, 2 years, sometimes a little bit younger. And then sometimes the females will stick around together, but a lot of the time they'll move off. They just need to be a little bit bigger. I've seen mums with litters from previous seasons that have kept with them for, yeah, about 2 years, I would say. Just about 2 years. They need to be a little bit bigger. They're a good food source for lion and for leopard and for cheetah, so it's hard for them. They have to be before they can walk. Now, Caitlin, they're born inside termite mounds. I'll find you a termite mound now. There's these holes that are in there that are made from an aardvark. An aardvark eats termites. It's got long ears and a big snout. And the aardvark digs in, and then when the aardvark's done with it, the warthogs go in. And the mum goes in backwards, and then she renovates a little bit. She makes her babies a little shelf, and they're teeny tiny when they come out. They're like this big. Sort of can fit in your hand. And then as they're born, within a day or so, they can walk around, probably a little bit less than a day. And then when they're a couple of weeks old, the mum will start bringing them out. It's very cute. Let's see if we can see these boys again. Now, other animals that will use these mud pans to cool down would be something like an elephant, like you saw with Jamie. There they go. But our warthogs are running off now, so I think let's head up to my friend Ralph, who's in Kenya, who I think has zebra, if I heard correctly, which will be fun for everybody to see. So let's head on up to him.
Thank you, Noel, and thank you to all the boys and girls that are joining us from Alanton and Red Bank Elementary. We're coming to you from Kenya, and that's a country in Africa, but it's quite a lot further north than South Africa, very close to the equator. And don't know if the teachers will be able to show you exactly where we are. But we're sitting here watching some beautiful zebra with their black and white markings. Zoe, you want to know how do we know the age of different animals? Well, Zoe, with different animals, we have different ways of finding out how old they are. Now, if we look at those two zebra there, well, we've got four of them. The one at the back on the left, that one there, is quite a lot younger than those ones on the right. And so the adults, they probably from about 3 years old. They're looking at really fully grown. So that one on the left is probably between a year and 2 years of age, because he's quite a lot younger than those. And so you can see from the size, you can also see a little bit from their coat or the fur that is on them. And so we use different techniques for different animals. Geordie, you want to know how long do zebra normally live for? If I'm not mistaken, it's about 20 years. But I'm just going to have a double check in my little book with all my ages of animals and how long they live, and because I do often forget. I am only human, but yes, I was exactly right. It's 20 years. So I double checked that. That's what I thought, and I was right. So zebras are quite similar to donkeys and horses, but we're going to go down to the river now and see if we can find any big crocodiles and hippos. But while we do that, let's head you on over to Jamie, who I think has got a lovely surprise for you.
I have a lovely surprise in the form of a big male giraffe that is stalking along the plains. So the last time that you saw me, we were with the elephant and the little elephant that was chasing birds. Now we are with something that stands even taller than an elephant. It might not be as bulky, but it is taller, the tallest mammal that we will see out here. And you can see he's flicking his head, trying to get rid of the birds that are pecking around his ears. And isn't he magnificent? Now, his legs are taller than me, his front legs. So from his feet to his shoulder is probably about, not quite, but close to double my height. So let's say I think the kids who are joining us this afternoon are around about 8 and 9 years old. So let's say you're around about as tall as I was. So if you stood on your friend's shoulders and then somehow your friend managed to stand on top of the two of you so that there were 3 of you all standing together, 2 of you on each other's shoulders, then you might just be able to touch the top of the giraffe's head, maybe, if you stretched right up. And can I just ask that you don't actually try this? Please don't try and stand on each other's shoulders because you'll get hurt. But if you can imagine, that's how big a giraffe is. It is a very, very tall animal. And that means when it walks, even though it looks like it's walking slowly, it's actually walking quite quickly because its legs might move slowly, but they cover at least a meter, probably more, every time they move one leg forward. So they can walk really quickly without having to rush. Unfortunately, he is walking right in front of the sun, but he'll give you a good idea of what he looks like next to the elephants. If I move for you, then you'll be able to compare him, or maybe not, actually he's walked right past them. Now, Taylor's got a very good question while we catch up with him, and unfortunately it's not going to be a great view because he is walking into the sun, so it's really, really hard to film him. But Taylor's got a really good question. Now, Taylor wants to know if a giraffe has a certain number of spots. What a good question. Do you know, I've never counted them. But I can tell you that every single giraffe has a unique pattern of spots. So no giraffe has spots the same as another giraffe, kind of like snowflakes. So how many of you, and I know it's been snowing a lot in certain parts of the States, you will have seen snow coming down, perhaps you've even seen snowflakes, and if you've ever looked closely at them, you'll know that they are completely different. Now, it's the same with giraffe spots, the same with your fingerprints, and I'm pretty sure, Taylor, that they've all got different numbers of spots. I don't think they have the same numbers of spots, but I've never been brave enough to count. Now, Kinsley, you want to know, well, how long is a giraffe's neck? And I tell you what, I can actually see some more because this is really, really hard to see in the bright sun. I'm having to blink. I can barely see. I've got purple spots in front of my eyes. Now, you want to know how long a giraffe's neck is. So a giraffe's neck is, depending on how big the giraffe is, because they come in different sizes, you know. But a giraffe's neck from the bottom of its throat right up to the top of its head is just about 2 meters. So to put that in feet, that's around about 6 feet. Give or take a little bit. The tallest giraffe in the world was over 6 meters tall. So over 18 feet tall. Now that is a very, very long creature from the bottom of its feet to the top of its head. Now Ralph has found an animal that can get very, very long from the tip of its snout to the tip of its tail.
Thanks, Jamie. And look at these smiling crocodiles. They look very happy lying on the bank of the Mara River. And crocodiles can live for over 100 years. So just think of that. That's very old for an animal. Riley, you've asked the question, what is the deadliest and probably the dangerous animal in Africa? Well, Riley, it's the one that we were just watching a little bit before the school drive, and that is the hippo, because they kill more people than any other animal. But it's not because they want to eat them, it's because we get in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the hippos don't like it if we come near to their family, so they defend their family, and the result is that we sometimes have people dying. But they kill more people than elephants and lions and leopard and buffalo and rhino. So we need to be very careful around the water where there are hippos, and we also need to be careful of crocodiles, because crocodiles don't really show themselves in the water. They are silent hunters, like that one over there. That's very often all you see from a crocodile, and they very slowly move through the water, and at the last minute they burst out of the water, grabbing whether it's a bird or an antelope that's come down for a drink. And so we also need to be careful if we want to go fishing or we want to go canoeing on the water where there's crocodiles. You need to be very careful because you won't see them coming. Now, these crocodiles here are quite big. You don't always see such big crocodiles. And crocodiles mostly eat fish, and in particular the catfish, which they lie in the current with their head facing upstream like that one's doing, and they open their mouth, and as soon as they feel something just swimming between their jaws, they snap it shut, and the food is in their mouth. Now, Taylor, you're asking how many teeth do they have? Well, they've got a very big mouth, don't they? And they've got a lot of teeth in there. I would say that they've got at least 50. But I'm sure that there is actually quite a lot more of them. But I wouldn't know the exact amount. But I think they also get replaced, not quite the same as that of sharks, which are replaced very quickly. I think with crocodiles they do take a little bit longer to be replaced because they are a lot thicker than sharks' teeth. But they do use them in a similar way. But with crocodiles, we can also remember that when they shut their mouth, that is a very strong bite down. But they can't open their mouth very easily. So if you've seen Steve Irwin or any of these crocodile hunters or people that work with snakes and reptiles, they very easily, even with a small piece of string, they can close a crocodile's mouth and he can't open it. So that's something to remember. If you're ever in trouble with a crocodile, just hold his mouth closed and you'll be safe. But with these crocodiles here, I won't be going anywhere near the water because they might be smiling, but they are rather dangerous. So we do need to be very careful. It would be silly of us to go down there because we would just put ourselves in harm's way, wouldn't we? But these crocodiles, they get very big like this because they do eat bigger animals, not just catfish. They also eat impala, and they eat zebra, and they eat wildebeest. Now, Jackson, you want to know how wide they can open their mouth? Well, they can pretty much open it to about a meter. So that would be about a yard. That's about as wide as they can open it. So it's quite wide, and they can open it wide enough to be able to grab onto a zebra or a wildebeest as they're crossing the river and pull them into the water, and then they will pull them under the water so that they can't breathe, and eventually they will drown, and that's when they will start eating them. And what they do is, when they want to eat them, because they don't bite off pieces of meat, what they will do is they will bite closed on a piece of the leg or a piece of the body, and then they start to spin around in circles, and in that way they rip off pieces of meat and swallow it down. So that's very interesting to know. And we've got lots of crocodiles here. Crocodiles need to get their energy from the sun. So that's why you see them lying on the bank like that, because they need to get their energy. And once they've got their energy, they then go back in the water and go hunting for fish. and anything else that is unlucky enough to be anywhere near these crocodiles. But there's obviously lots of food around because there's lots of crocodiles, and they're also very big. So they've obviously been eating very well. But the brown water of the Mara River is very good for crocodiles and all the animals to drink from. So the crocodiles are always just waiting for anything to come down to drink, and then they are the silent hunters. See there? A very evil smile, isn't it? And look at the scales on the top of the tail and the back of the crocodile. That makes it easier for him to swim in the water. So when he faces upstream, it's very easy for the water to flow straight over his back. And then he'll use his tail a little bit like a fish, and he's also got webbing between his toes. So he's got tools like a duck and a fish. So a crocodile has got very, very good tools for being living and surviving in the water. Okay, everybody, and especially for the school group, I'm going to be leaving these crocodiles just now, and maybe we'll go looking for those lions again. So don't go anywhere. We're going to send you on over to Jamie in the meantime, who is going to show you how it is driving around the Mara Triangle.
It is amazing driving around the Mara Triangle because all of a sudden you just find yourself in amongst a herd of elephants. So we're going to get a little bit further, or a little bit closer towards them, and then we'll stop and chat about them. But while we're on our way, a warm welcome to the viewers joining us on WCFF. It is great to have you. If you have just discovered these live safaris, this is 100% live from the Masai Mara in Kenya and the greater Kruger area of South Africa. So at the moment we're in the Masai Mara of Kenya. We're coming up to some elephants, and because this is 100% live, send us through your questions on the platform that you're watching, and we'd love to hear from you. At the moment we are joined by two schools this afternoon. Well, it's fastest this afternoon, and the kids watching are around about 8-9 years old, much sort of around the same level as this young elephant who's up in front of us, not the same age. So this elephant, kids, is probably about 3 years old. And in human terms, that kind of means that he's around about your age in terms of his development. You can see he's playing about here with the sand using his trunk, touching it, sniffing, blowing, and he's actually having a great time. Oh! Did you get a little bit of a dust particle up your nose? Now we have a question from Soren, I think it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Megs. And you would like to know about the length of an elephant's trunk. Now here's the amazing thing. An elephant's trunk can stretch right up to around about over 1.5 meters in an adult elephant. So that is around about 5 feet or so. But an elephant's trunk is an amazing thing, and forgive me, I'm just going to move slightly so that we can let this car past. The amazing thing about an elephant's trunk is it's like an accordion. Do you know what an accordion is? Now, an accordion is a type of musical instrument that can stretch out and go back in and stretch out. Hello, everyone. So it can stretch out and go back in and contract. And that's because an elephant's trunk doesn't have any bones in it. It's just made up of muscles. So let us see if I can show you what I mean. So what that means is an elephant's trunk can bend in any direction it wants to. It can stretch forward, it can pull back up. Let's watch them use their trunks now. Now, an elephant uses a trunk for lots of different things. It uses it for feeding, mostly, wrapping around the grass like this elephant's doing, and then moving the food to its mouth. It will also use its trunk for drinking. So what it does is it pulls the water up into its mouth, or into its trunk, kind of like a straw, but not quite, because it doesn't actually suck the water up through its trunk and then swallow it. It pulls the water up into its trunk and then it moves it to its mouth. Now, an elephant's trunk is so strong that it can snap big branches, and at the same time, it can also pick up a toothpick off the ground. So their trunks are very, very sensitive, very delicate trunks. And they'll also use it to touch each other, so wrap around their heads, make contact, because as I told you before, elephants are all very closely bonded to each other. Okay, let us go from one extreme to the other, all the way back across to Scott, who is in South Africa, and he would like to show you something a little bit smaller than an elephant.